Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back. My name is Victoria Kerr, and I will be moderating the panel, which starts at 3:30 on battlefield evidence and transitional justice. But before that, we have an incredible speaker joining us today, and I would like to introduce Professor Magdalena Gawin, who is director of the Pilecki Institute and the Lemkin Center. In response to the Russian aggression against Ukraine, the Pilecki Institute set up the Lemkin Center, whose mission is to collect individual eyewitness accounts and create an archive that will consolidate the accounts of crimes committed by the Russian troops on the territory of Ukraine. Today, Professor Gawin will launch a very important report on the work of the Lemkin Center so far, and overall, she will present a picture of the war that emerges from the collected accounts by her organization. So I would like to give the floor to Professor Gawin.
Dzień dobry Państwu, nazywam się Magdalena Gawin.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Magdalena Gawin. I'm a historian. I'm a professor of history. I deal with the 19th and 20th century. This is my area of expertise. I was also a deputy minister for culture. I'd like to start with not obvious thing. I'd like to read out an authentic testimonial that was collected by a Lemkin Institute.
We have a testimonies translated from Ukrainian into Polish, so please put the mic and just listen. Świadectwo numer 565.
Testimonial number 565. 55 years old, education, moderate, Ługańsk region. He wrote down his testimonial on the 4th of October 2022 in Warsaw. On the 6th of March in Troicki, Ługańsk, the occupation started. The Ural came, Russian army. Ukrainian volunteers created an event in the city center. I went there with my wife. After the event, when I was coming back home, the armed militaries were waiting there. I don't know who they were, maybe Russians, or they were from the Republic of Ługańsk, I don't know. Then, on the 16th of September, when I was passing by the police office, I met 3 masked people who wanted to force me to enter the building. I didn't want to enter. I wanted to fight, and then they pushed the gun to my neck. And then they forced me to enter the building. I asked them to inform my family about the fact. In the building, they put me facing the wall. When I turned away, they hit me into my face. It was so hard that I hit the wall with my head. They searched through my pockets. They took my keys to my car, to my apartment. Then they took me to a cell. I was asking them to inform my wife, who was working in a shop. One of them hit me in my face. And then when I was in the cell, I couldn't move around because of the fact that I had handcuffs on my hands, on my wrists. And on the 18th of September of 2022, after the lunch, around 3 p.m., I heard my wife being taken out of the cell, and I heard the sound of the tape being taken out of her skin. Then, in my cell, this door for giving food was opened. I moved to the door. Somebody, a stinking hand, gave me some kind of cloth. They asked me, told me to leave to the corridor. They used handcuffs. Somebody put them on my wrists. And then I had the cloth on my head, and they used the tape to put it around my head. They placed me in a chair. My hands were at the back. I could hear there were 3 people in the room, and they started to put a pressure on me. They said that Ukrainians are nationalists, that Russia has never lost a war, that Zelensky is a Nazi, and that he's a clown. Then they started to investigate me. They started asking me who's pro-Ukrainian in our city, who's connected to Ukraine. Then they put a wire next to my ear, and if I decided not to answer, they used electricity to torture me. My head was shaking, and I was feeling that maybe it will fall down. I felt pain, and I bit my tongue because of the pain. Then they started asking about my father. I had this cloth over my head. There was nothing. There was silence. I didn't say anything. They kept me there for 9 days. They gave me back my phone. They checked my house. 4 days later, my wife was let out. My wife said that they pushed her to admitting that she's regretting supporting Ukraine. When I left the police office, I found out how people can leave Ukraine and go to Poland. It was necessary to have a story that you say that you want to go to Russia, have one story and stick to it. Then the rain started falling. We were waiting in rain with no shelter. Nobody let us to leave Russia. One woman asked border guards, is it possible to act this way? And they said, you're Russian citizens. Ladies and gentlemen, this is just one testimonial, one of testimonials that we selected in Lemkin Center. We created that in Pilecki Institute after the outbreak of Russian aggression in Ukraine. And now let's do it. Everybody heard that speech. What was striking was clearly defined refusal of accepting the existence of Ukrainian nation. He said that there are no Ukrainians, that they are Russians. And if you are interested in history, if you heard about Lemkin, we were trying to popularize Lemkin 3 years ago. That was a signal. It made it clear what kind of war he wanted to create. The war has its aim to distract the country, make sure that the population extincts. And right now, if you imagine the way of creating the memory of a world after a military conflict, I must say that it happens by individual testimonials. People need this. This is what we need. We cannot adapt, we cannot understand or embrace huge numbers, historical processes. We cannot identify ourselves with a nation but if we don't have this individual aspect. We have 2 testimonials. One type of testimonials is done under oath in a court, and the second type of a testimonial without the oath, when you go to a historical institution and you give a testimonial. The memory of the world is created by the second type of testimonials. And the question is why? The
zeznania, natomiast one są
legislation
prowadzone
system
określonymi
collects
Można mówić tylko o czynie
the
zabronionym,
testimonials. If we
mogą
talk
mówić
about
tylko
prosecution,
świadkowie
they
naoczni. Bardzo
collect
często są to bardzo
testimonials.
wąskie,
You need to be a
bardzo,
witness to make a testimonial.
powiedziałabym, ograniczone
They're very
zeznania,
narrowed,
ale co więcej, one nie mogą być
limited
upubliczniane
testimonials,
aż do
and they
procesu.
cannot be public.
Jako historyk zajmowałam się
And
wiele
as a
lat zeznaniami
historian,
przed Główną Komisją Badania
I've
Zbrodni
been
hitlerowskich w Polsce.
checking
Proszę mi
the
wierzyć,
testimonials
że już jest ponad
of
80 lat
the
od wybuchu
Hitler
wojny.
actions
Zeznania
in
Polaków
Poland,
aż do
and it's
2015 roku. Ogromny
70 years after the
zasób,
war,
ponad
we have
30%
many testimonials of
było
Poles, but
niedeklasyfikowanych.
30% out of those
Czyli
were not
znajdowały się
classified.
nadal
So they were
w
there,
niedawnych zasobach
and they were not
prokuratury.
public.
ICC w Hadze i
The
ich cały zespół
ICC,
tych świadectw, pomimo że niektórzy
the team
zbrodniarze zostali
dealing with
ukarani,
testimonials,
do dzisiaj
even though
ta baza świadectw
some
nie jest
people were
jawna.
prosecuted,
Dlatego
that
potrzebowaliśmy
base of testimonial
ukraińskich
is still
świadectw
not public.
nieobciążonych
That's
przysięgą.
why we needed
Ale
those
zbieramy je-
testimonials, the second type of them, without the
Przepraszam,
oath.
że ja podejdę, ale
By
zbieramy je
collecting the
zgodnie z
testimonials,
pewnymi
we follow
zasadami.
certain rules.
Collects individual testimonies of civilians witness of Russian crimes, Ukraine, processes the testimonies to build an archive of anonymized accounts for future use, war correspondents, journalists, historians, family members. Why we didn't reveal our archive? The reason is very obvious, because we protect personal data of our eyewitnesses. The war from the beginning was unexpected, and we didn't know what happened later. And because of that, we decided to cover the personal data and to protect our witness. And the second reason, the next reason, popularize knowledge about Russian crimes in order to prevent world's fatigue from war is absolutely obvious. How we gather testimonies. First of all, we gather testimonies from Poland, from refugees from different regions. And we prepared questionnaires, are based on international law and can be filled by witness themselves or with the help of protocoler. All the testimonies are written by the eyewitness in mother tongue, in Russian or in Ukrainian. Then we translate them into Polish and then into English. We have also video interviews, because the second part, very important testimonies, are gathered on the ground in Ukraine by our employees or volunteers. And we reached to the deoccupied territory very, very early, after 2 days even, and we just asked people what they went through, what happened. And we have also other forms of interviews and questionnaires. It's audio interviews. It's recording offline, because some witnesses, especially in Ukraine, don't want to testify and to see the faces. Those people are terrified. Some of them have members of family in Russia, and they just scared to testify openly with face. And this is because we chose also this kind of interviews. Supplementary photos and videos to illustrate other types of testimonies, media reports collected in Ukraine and abroad. Work of the Lemkin Center. First of all, our employees and visit refugee center, very, very different in Poland. Across the Poland, we also visited many times Rzeszów and Kraków and Gdańsk and Wrocław, and of course Warsaw. Sometimes we were also invited by the Poles who just received refugees under their own roof. We also appeared in the huge refugee center, or very, very small Sometimes we also appeared, on the railway station, like on my right hand. And the typing and the gathering records on Ukraine, this is the typical way that we're getting proof for the Russian crimes. This is the inhabitant of one of the town in Ukraine. She is sitting on a bench around ruins. So once again, testimonies are without oath, but with some rules, which is very important for prosecutors, by eyewitness in mother tongue. They are safe based on international law, accompanied by the trained employee or volunteer. They also contains personal data of the witness and consist more than 40 questions. But firstly, we also give a chance for our volunteers, for our witness, to say everything what they want to say, or just to write everything what they want to write. About observation, about everyday living, about, for example, I can give one very good example. Testimonies before the prosecutor, they have no observation from everyday life. How to spend in a bunker, for example, 2 weeks without electricity, without water, deprived from the very basic, things. So our testimonies also contain such details. And as I said, the testimonies are in 4-language version: Ukrainian, Russian, Polish, and English. This is the one of the example of completed questionnaire written in Ukrainian. As you see, we cover all the personal data. And this is our witnesses on the ground. In different conditions, sometimes we just getting the testimonies just sitting at their flats, homes, houses, at the backyard. This is a very impressive picture, one of our witness. Processing of the testimonies is very easy. Is a registration, description, digitalization, anonymization, and translation. Archive in numbers. We collect 434 written testimonies, 80 sessions conducted, 58 locations visited, 90 regions of Ukraine presented in the witness story. We have 366 video interviews. 48 came from frontline or recently deoccupied locations documented. And this is the geography which shows from which region we have the biggest collection is Kharkiv, Kherson, Kiev, and Donetsk. And the rest, the gray color, illustrates the other places like Odessa, Żytomyr, Sumy, Chernihiv, Zaporozhye, and Lugansk. And when it relates to the cities, the largest part of our testimonies came from Kharkiv, Mariupol, Kiev, Mykolaiv, Kherson, and the other places. What type of crimes we registered? And the first of all is the destruction of civil infrastructure, which is absolutely obvious because of the Russian tactics. The second, captivity, abduction, restricted movement, interrogation. C, deprivation of a basic human rights, hunger, thirst, lack of medical help, limitation of communication, civilian death or injury, looting and robbery, and deportation. And this is the proportion from our collection. Video interviews, the large proportion are from Kiev. I mean from Kiev city and the surroundings of Kiev, the little villages. The second is Donetsk and the other places. Oops. Something happened. I'm sorry. Okay. As I said, we have a very big collection of testimonies from Mariupol, but we also have a very big collection from Andriivka. Andriivka is a village, is a small village near Kiev. And what was the reason that we decided to collect from Andriivka? Everybody know Bucha case, and mainly because of that, because Bucha was typical middle-class town near Kiev. Andriivka, I mean, inhabitants of Andriivka is not well-off people, rather ordinary people. I mean, inhabitants, just ordinary inhabitants. And many people from Andriivka ran away, and we gather more than 90 testimonies from Andriivka, and we registered crimes happen in Andriivka. Deprivation of basic human rights during the occupation, and the referendum mechanics, I mean how the propaganda works, implementation of the propagandistic education. We also noticed different approaches of occupiers. It depends of the region. I mean, generally, the occupation in the central Ukraine was much more harsh than in the eastern territories. We are talking about, for example, completely control and ban for a movement in Kiev region. Hunting for patriotic residents, ban for civilians to leave their houses. On the eastern territories, the occupation has a different character. This is quite few picture, very drastic, but we are talking about the war, so sorry that we present it, but we have to, we are obliged to see how it looks like the interment of ban. And very often, occupiers introduced completely ban of interment. So the human bodies just were lying on the ground for long weeks. This is the way, like inhabitants try to desperately protect the body of the relatives under the internment ban. And this is the other example. This is the typical graves of people. And near the houses are just destruction of civil infrastructure. It's illustrate the character of the war. Very important traits of the war is scorched earth. I mean that the occupiers just withdrawing from the town, from the village. They killed animals, they destroyed everything what they are able to destroy. And this is the presentation of the war and war against civilians. This is like thousands of photos illustrates the same, that it was the conscious and deliberate war against civilians. to deprive them from the human rights, to deprive them from very basic national rights, I would say, and to destroy also the culture and the national identity. The war against civilians, it is not just a tactics without aim. This is the deliberate war of Russia against Ukraine. During the war, it appears something very specific, like a children of war. I mean, little children, like this beautiful girl, who show us where people were burned. This is very typical for the all military conflicts and occupation, and it also shows how many psychological aid those people will need after the end of the war. This is, for example, one of our eyewitness who was a witness when the column of cars fulfilled by the civilians were attacked and the people were burned on the spot. This is example of propaganda, how propaganda replaces education. On the right picture, we can see the new textbooks, which was implemented into the school on the territory occupied by Russia. Also some leaflets, magazine, who presented, of course, the great commander of Russia. On the left hand is also some kind of documentation which was resent to all school, introducing Russian language as the only language of teaching. Story from the questionnaire, and we would like to present a short story, very, very short. I just asking you about patience. This is the last few minutes of my presentation. This is the story of marriage, Oksana and her husband. She just moved to Andriivka just because both of them, and the wife and the husband, thought that the Andriivka as a small village will be more safety place. After a few days, her husband just disappeared. And she was looking for him desperately for a few weeks. At the end of April, her neighbors let her know that they found the body of her husband. And it appeared in Ukraine hundreds or thousands of times. This is the story of Oksana.
Ви будете вдома? Коли поліція прийде, я вас заїду за
Це напроти мене.
Я поняла.
Біленький будинок і гараж там
Хорошо.
виходить на вулицю.
Це дітки ходили, шукали, так? Микола Петрович.
Thank you very much. I just would like to present you that our records came from the moment when the members of family found the body of mother, father, uncle, aunt, sometimes children. And the primary goal of the Lemkin Center and the collection is very obvious. Russia had no any Nuremberg, have no any trials. All the perpetrators from the 20th century who organized the cutting, who organized the worst, absolutely terrible war crimes were never punished. And those stories shows us that if war murderers are not punished, the crime repeat once again. So please, the very first time, we live in very unique times when Russia is weak, when we can help Ukraine, and when we can help Middle Eastern Europe. The first time, the punishment is necessary. The punishment is not expression of revenge. It's expression of justice. And it's also the very important element or instrument of prevention against the next aggression. Russia was not punished and because attacked once again. We must take responsibility for the peace in Europe. And because of that, the punishment for war criminals, for politicians who are responsible for the aggression is necessary. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Gavin, for your very moving presentation and also for sharing the very comprehensive work that the Lemkin Center are doing at the moment. In the interest of time, we are going to start the next panel just in a few minutes. And if you have any questions for Professor Gavin, you will be able to ask them at the end of the panel. Thank you.